Hiya folks, today I would like to talk about Dharma Talks. The word Dharma Talk comes from a Japanese word hogo, which does not mean what you think it means, you filthy animal. It actually literally means Dharma talk or Dharma words. And there's another word that you often hear used by the Rinzai tradition and very, very seldom by anybody in the Soto tradition, which is teisho. I'd like to read you the definition of these words provided by the handy-dandy and amusingly titled Shambhala Dictionary of Buddhism and Zen, as if Zen is not Buddhism. Here's their definition of hogo. Literally Dharma words. The living truth of Buddhism, particularly the sayings relating to Zen of the patriarchs. Usually ancestors is the preferred word these days. And the ancient masters of the Chan, aka Zen tradition. Such sayings have been readily cited by later Zen masters in their teisho. And here's their definition of teisho. Teisho, literally recitation, offering, presentation. In Zen, the presentation of a Zen realization by a Zen master, Roshi, during a sesshin. And sesshin doesn't mean session, it's a long period of Zen practice of several days. The word is derived from te, carry, offer, show, present, proclaim, and show, recite, proclaim. The Roshi offers the teisho, which generally has a koan, or an important passage in Zen literature as its theme, to the Buddha in the presence of the assembly of practitioners. So the talk is offered in this tradition to the Buddha and not necessarily to the people who are listening. So it's a kind of a weird conceptual idea there. It is not an explanation, commentary, or exposition in the usual sense, and certainly not a lecture in the academic sense. Thus, the frequent translation of teisho as a lecture is misleading, and presentation is more accurate. No one is being lectured here. I find the change in tone kind of funny there. It's like somebody stepped in to the dictionary and yelled something here. No one is being lectured here, and purveyance of factual knowledge is not the point. The Roshi's offering is free from everything conceptual. It is an immediate demonstration of his genuine insight into the theme treated, and for that reason can touch the deepest mind of its hearers. That's a tall order. These days the phrase Dharma talk is being used for a lot of stuff. When I was looking it up online, I found that there were instructions there for how yoga teachers can deliver Dharma talk. So as far as I know, the phrase Dharma talk comes from the Buddhist tradition and yoga does not. So they're borrowing that phrase, and I even saw something about Bill Murray giving a Dharma talk at some event that he was at. I don't know what it was. So people are using this very freely. But in a real Dharma talk, there are some specific ways that it is done. So like I did yesterday, I'm going to look at the book Zen Ritual. It looks a lot better today, I think, because the sun isn't shining directly on it. And here are some of the traditional things they say about how a Dharma talk was given. This is an example from the Korean tradition, and this is, I believe, an American who visited Korea telling about what he saw in the Korean monasteries, the Zen monasteries over there. Once the audience is settled and still, the Son master, that's Zen, enters from the center door and takes his regular seat amid the assembly. His attendant enters simultaneously from a side door at the front of the hall, as is appropriate to his status, and takes his seat next to the dais. The monk coordinating the ceremony, usually the verger or a senior monk, strikes a moktok at once. That's a little wooden sort of cowbell sounding thingy. The audience then rises and recites in unison a short verse or a series of verses. The assembly resumes its seats and listens silently as the monk coordinating the ceremony and an assistant perform a 10-minute ritual. After that ritual is finished, two monks from the audience, usually the master's attendant and one of the younger meditation monks, come forward and prostrate themselves 3 times before the Son master as an invitation to him to deliver his lecture. The master bows with palms together once at his seat in response, rises and walks to the dais accompanied by the 2 monks. After the master is seated, the verger, I'm not even sure what a verger is, but we'll just let that pass. I guess it's one of the roles in the ceremony. The verger will lead the monks in special bowing and chanting 3 times, requesting formally that the master impart his wisdom to them. The rector then strikes the chukpi, I'm not sure what that is, these are the Korean terms, initiating some 3 minutes of silent meditation in order to get the monks into the appropriate frame of mind for hearing the lecture. When the rector strikes the chukpi 3 times to end the period, the audience, which had been facing directly forward throughout this time, turns slightly towards the dais. The master then raises his son staff and strikes it hard against the dais 3 times to mark the beginning of the lecture. And then the guy gets to talk. These days, that sort of very, very formal, introductory kind of thing isn't practiced very often at your sort of run-of-the-mill Zen centers that you might walk into somewhere in the USA or Europe. But they'll do an abbreviated version usually. I've given talks at various places, and sometimes I am required by the place to dress up in my robes and to do a kind of ritual where I offer incense to the Buddha and I bow 3 times and there's a bell ringing and there's chanting and stuff. That's a fairly standard thing. Another sort of shorter version is to recite a verse called the opening of the sutras just before the talk begins, and a verse called the closing of the sutras after the talk ends. And I just so happened to find the little handout that somebody prepared in Tokyo when I was studying with Nishijima Roshi, and this is how we did it there. The little thingy at the beginning says, lectures at Dogen Sanga's seminar are usually based on readings from the Shobo Genzo, a large and difficult work written by Master Dogen in Japan in the 13th century, and from Mula Madhyamaka Karika, written by Master Nagarjuna in India around the 2nd century. In spite of the difficulty of both these works, we feel that they are the best guide to Buddhist philosophy and to the truth itself. The complete English translation of the Shobo Genzo is available in 4 volumes, while the photocopied chapters of Mula Madhyamaka Karika, available here, is an interim product of our efforts to translate Mula Madhyamaka Karika as exactly as possible into understandable English. Blah 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 about the translations, and then it gives the Kai Kyoge. This is the verse to open the sutras, and I'm going to chant it for you the way we used to chant it. Mujo jinshin mi myoho hyakusen mango nan sogu ga kon ken mon tokuju ji gange nyorai shinjitsu gi. And the translation they have here is, even if we live for countless eons, we may not have the good fortune to meet the supreme, profound, and subtle teachings of the truth. But now I see and hear them. Now I can make them my own. Thus I pray that I will understand the true meaning of Gautama Buddha's teachings. And then after that it says, after the lecture there will be time for discussion. This is an important time, for it is through questions and answers that the Buddhist way of thinking and seeing things gradually comes into focus. After the lecture and discussion, we recite the verse extending merit to all beings, and that's Fueko, and I'm going to chant that for you too. Nega waku wa kono kudoku o motte amaneku isai ni oyoboshi warera to shujo to mina tomo ni butsudo o jozen koto o jiho san shi ishi fu shi sonbu sa moko sa moko hoja horomi. And their translation of that goes, I would like the virtue which has accumulated as a result of reciting these sutras to be spread throughout the earth and to all living beings. Thus I pray to the Buddhas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, to innumerable bodhisattvas and mahasattvas, and to Maha Prajnaparamita, the great real wisdom, which is the way to the truth. Now, a more standard version of that you'll hear in Zen temples in the USA and probably something in Europe. I'm getting this from the booklet that was passed out at the Great Sky Sesshin, which I was at a few years ago. And here's their version. The sutra opening verse goes, the unsurpassed, profound, and wondrous Dharma is rarely met with even in 100,000 million kalpas. Now we can see and hear it, accept and maintain it. May we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth. And Tathagata is Buddha. And their version of the closing verse is, "May this merit extend universally to all, so that we together with all beings realize the Buddha way." Now, in Dogen's work, you find a lot of different types of writing. And one of the things you will find is what the folks these days are calling a Dharma Hall discourse. And a lot of these can be found in Dogen's extensive record Eihei Koroku. So I just kind of opened this at random this morning to find some. And here's one I came up with that I thought was interesting. Dharma Hall discourse on the first day of the 9th month, 1249. This morning is the first day of the 9th month. With 3 hits on the han, that's a wooden block, we sit zazen. Dropped off body and mind are unshakable, like making a fist with no hands. The end. That is Dogen's entire talk for that day in 1249. Or how about this one? The sitting cushions of the 7 Buddhas are now about to be worn through. The sleeping stick of my former teacher has been transmitted. Eyes and nose should be upright and straight, head top reaching up to the blue sky, and ears aligned above the shoulders. At this very time, how is it? After a pause, Dogen said, "Do not control the monkey mind or horse will. Make an effort like a lotus in fire." The end again. In Shobogenzo, you can find some much longer versions of talks that Dogen gave. And here's one I just picked more or less at random. This is Showaku Makusa. This is the one that I retitled Don't Be a Jerk in my book, Don't Be a Jerk. And it goes for, in English translation, 12 pages. So it's a lot longer than the ones I just read to you. And it ends with, preached to the assembly at Kosho Horinji Temple on the evening of the moon, doesn't say what kind of moon, in the 2nd year of Enno. What do they say, moon? Yeah, I guess it's the full moon, I suppose. But as you can see, he gave lectures that were long and detailed and lectures that were short and sweet. He also gave fundraising talks. I know there's one in Shobogenzo, but it would take me forever to find it, which is listed as being given to lay people on the occasion of trying to raise money for something they were building at Eiheiji, I think, or one of the temples where Dogen worked. So they were given for different purposes at different times, and generally speaking, these talks were delivered mainly for the benefit of monks who were living and working full-time and doing Zen as their main thing. And outsiders were allowed to join in and kind of watch and hang out, and I think maybe the outsiders were even allowed to ask questions, because Q&A sessions were common, and there's nothing I can find in the literature that says only monks were allowed to ask questions, though knowing Japanese society, I would say probably only the monks actually ask the questions, because that's kind of the way it goes there. But they weren't delivered for a kind of general audience. And this is the difference between a Dharma talk now as it's done in America and Europe and other places, English-speaking places or European language-speaking places around the world. Because we've developed this new thing, which, as far as I know, never really existed in China or Japan or Korea. Now, somebody out there who knows Chinese, Japanese, and Korean tradition can correct me if they think I'm wrong, but I know I've never heard of this happening in Japan, which is that you open a center up and you say anybody who wants to can come and sit Zazen with us, and then after half an hour or 40 minutes or whatever of Zazen, then a lecture is delivered or some kind of talk is given, and that's what they call a Dharma talk these days. So it's a totally unprecedented thing. You didn't have that. You didn't have just somebody who came in off the street, does Zazen for the first time in their very lives, and then gets to hear a talk about it. So this means that you have to pitch it differently these days. What I've been doing at the Angel City Zen Center is, when I first got back to the United States and started doing these Zen things, I did that. I did every talk. So people would come in, sit Zazen for half an hour, and then I would give a talk of some kind. But after a while, I kind of felt like I'm running out of stuff to say. And it was getting very repetitive. So I just found different people who had been around for a while and said, can you give a talk? And can you give a talk? And this eventually developed into a system wherein at the Angel City Zen Center, we have, I think, 4 or 5 people who I have chosen and we have chosen together as people who who we want to give talks, and they give talks, and then I give 2 a month instead of doing, every one of them. And this works out really well because my philosophy is at the Angel City Zen Center that what we come for is to do Zazen. That is the number one important thing. And the talk afterwards is just a little reward for getting through it. It's like if you were 7 years old and you went to the doctor to get a shot and you were a good little girl or little boy and you took the shot and you didn't scream, so the doctor gives you a lollipop. So if you do the Zazen and don't scream, we give you a little lollipop reward in the form of a talk. And I try to keep the tone of the talks fairly low key. I want to present some kind of traditional Buddhist teaching. This is a kind of a funny thing. There are people every once in a while who send me emails getting really angry at me going, why do you just teach, from your teachers and quote these old sources? Why don't you say something for yourself? And I feel like I say plenty for myself anyway. But really, part of the tradition is to present the tradition. You're not supposed to just kind of improvise your own thing. You're supposed to present the tradition, and this is what I do, and this is what my teachers did, and that's how it's done. So I have several people who I trust to do that, and they come and do it on a regular basis at the Angel City Zen Center, and I'm usually there. And if anybody says anything weird, I'll maybe say something, but I've never had to say anything, so I think we're pretty safe. My first teacher, Tim, had a funny way of doing it, which is that he had a room that was on the Kent State campus. They'd have it from, say, 10 in the morning till 11:30 or something. And what would happen is people would kind of filter in gradually, and Tim would just chat with them until this one guy whose job it was to keep an eye on the time would say, Tim, we're running out of time. And then we'd sit Zazen for half an hour, and then after that half an hour, there was no more time for anything else, so we'd just go and usually have lunch. Usually most of the people who sat with us went for the lunch, but, you didn't have to. So that was his way of doing it, which I really thought was great, because it got rid of the whole pretentious sort of Dharma talk thing that you have to do. Anyway, that's my little thing about Dharma Talks. I hope it was useful or edifying. If you want to contribute to me, there are links below to PayPal and Patreon. I'm doing my taxes right before I was doing this and seeing how pitiful the book royalties I got. I got $2,000 in book royalties from one of my publishers this year. So it really do depend on your support to keep this thing going. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. See you later. Bye.